Prognosis EMR, creating input templates. The final tier in the hierarchy of template design for all categories is the template itself. Now, in this series of videos, we've been using the analogy of writing a book. We've previously spoken of the chapters or the category in organ systems, as well as the words or the pages, which would be the elements or the bullets. Now, the template actually is the book. And this is the screen on which the patient's story is told, so to speak, where you record the responses from the patient as well as the clinician or provider's observations during the visit. A template can have one or multiple categories or organ systems. In addition, at the template level, you can define billable CPT or HCPCS codes to either automatically bill or so that the user has to manually choose on a case-by-case basis. And finally, the template, of course, will display on your output in the form of the progress note, your procedure form, or letters. So I have toggled into Prognosis here as a system administrator, and we're concerned with this bottom portion under Input Elements, Tests, and Templates, specifically this third line. Now, what we're about to cover in this video applies to these first 7 categories, from social history through clinic forms. So for my first example, I'm going to go here to social history. I'm going to click my template option. Now, you'll notice in my library, I already have a few templates that exist. So let's say we want to create a new social history for our children, because we don't need it to include certain things that our adult template does. So I'm simply going to click Add New at the bottom. Now, the assumption here is we have already created our categories and our elements. So I have a blank template now. I'm going to simply name it, and I'll just go ahead and call this Pediatric Social History. At this point in our discussion, I'm not going to worry about the classification or the sequence. So again, going back to our analogy of writing the book, we've given our book a title. So now we have to decide what chapters are going to be in our book. And then once we've chosen our chapters, we decide which pages or words on those pages need to be there. So first of all, here along our left-hand side, under the umbrella Systems, is our chapters, so to speak. And you'll notice that we have a plus sign. Universally within Prognosis, that is our search and select. So I'm going to click that plus sign, and this brings up all of my social history categories. We see that I have abuse history, diet, drugs, alcohol, and so on. I'm going to come down here to the one called Pediatric. Now, I've chosen that system or chapter, but in order to save it to my template, on the right-hand side, I have my list of tests, or the elements, the bullets. I have to choose at least one in order to save the system to my template. If I don't, then the system is going to disappear. So on the right-hand side, I have all of the possible questions under my Pediatric Social History category. If I want all of them, I quickly just click this uppermost checkbox, which is my all or none toggle, and notice that automatically selects every element underneath, and I can save it. And that has now taken that chapter of Pediatric Social History, added it into my new book, Pediatric Social History, and within that chapter I have all of these individual elements, so when I'm on the encounter I will be able to answer them. Now, maybe you don't care about the school performance. You do want to know the grade in the school but not their performance, so you can deselect that. Maybe extracurricular activities and sports for you are synonymous, so you don't want to have sports separate. You'll include that in extracurricular, so you simply deselect it and go ahead and save. So even though those elements are displayed here in template design, unless it is selected with the check mark, it is not going to actually display on the template for your encounter. So I can quickly open an encounter to show you the results of that template that you just created. And go here to my social history, and in my drop down I have my new template, Pediatric Social History, and it shows only the elements I've chosen. Notice the sports is not there, the performance is not there because I removed them. So even though they're in my design view, they're not actually on the encounter. I'm going to go back to Settings Configuration. Now that process applies to all of these classifications, from social history all the way over here to clinic forms. And as I said, we're not going to look at each one. However, I do want to just open up the specialty and the clinic form screens here momentarily to show you a couple of the differences. And remember that there are separate videos that deals with these in detail. I'm just going to go ahead and click Add New real quick. We're not going to go through this in this video, but you'll notice across the header section I have a lot of additional fields and icons and checkbox options. So in the interest of creating your specialty input templates, in addition to what we just covered with choosing the different systems and then the individual elements within each system, you have these additional behaviors that you can also define. So please remember to look at the specialty input template video to get those details. And similarly, if we look at our clinic forms, you'll notice at the top we have the additional options over here which are unique to clinic forms, which again are covered in a separate video. So overall, the general design of your template is going to be the same across all of the different classifications. Now, one last feature to keep in mind is how these templates are going to come out in your output, such as your progress note and your operative reports. So we're going to go into the encounter level now and look at a couple of these examples. Here in our standard progress note, as we scroll through, we see that each template is represented by a narration. So under our history of present illness, each individual template, there is a descriptive paragraph. And as we go through, we will see all of our face sheet level data, review of systems, physical exam, procedures, and so on. Now, a separate video addresses these output templates. But what I do want to point out to you here in conjunction with the input templates is you can have a singular template produce different formats. For instance, here on our progress note, when we look at our specialty section in this example, we've got all the details of our vitamin B12 injection, including the lot number, manufacturer, expiration. And then we have our pre-op, post-op diagnoses and the details of our trigger point injection. If I choose a different progress note template, however, we'll notice those same input templates display in a different format. We see here that each one is simply listed in a bulleted list by the procedure name. And in this scenario, you can have all of the details of the procedure in the form of an op note. So if I click here on my specialty template preview, for instance, my B12 injection, the procedure form or op note gives me the details. If I click on the trigger point injection, we will see even a different type of detail because this goes into the extensive narrative of my procedure. So from a singular input template, you can have various outputs in different syntax, different formats. And again, those are covered in separate videos as to creating the output. But in review of creating input templates are the final tier in your template design, and this is what facilitates the documentation of your patient's answers or the provider's observations during an encounter. These principles apply to all classifications: social history, vitals, HPI, review of systems, etc. When building a template, they may reflect one or more categories or organ systems, each of which could have one or more elements or bullet points. In the case of specialty templates, you can assign billable CPT HCPCS codes to either automatically bill or to be manually chosen by the user on a case-by-case basis. And finally, the template will display on your generated output, such as your progress notes, procedure forms, and letters.